Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
You two are like ticking time bombs. The entire time that I am sitting here setting things up, your fidgeters are going, blah, 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 and I'm like, it feels like a bomb that's ticking and it's going to.
Do you feel anxious? Do you feel stressed out?
You feel stressed out by our stress.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. This is a mirror of what it's like to be in our bodies.
Yeah. It was really funny. I was watching it. I was like, that's like on hyperdrive when I put the two of you together.
We're good fidgeters.
One of the things that I thought is, what are the intolerable emotions they might be feeling?
Oh.
Maybe we should talk about that today.
Oh, what a segue.
Nice
See what I did that?
segue.
What a
there.
segue.
He's professional.
I'm pretty excited about today's podcast. We originally did a podcast, our very first recording with Ruth, of video recording.
Yes.
We had a little bit of difficulties and it didn't get launched,
Yep.
but it was a
Not
great
due,
time.
in fact, to any of us.
But stuff just happened.
Stuff happens.
That's how we roll.
Yep.
You deal
And-
with
So
the
we
punches.
spent, I think we spent like 6 hours.
I think we did.
recording.
I was slightly starting to lose the will to live, but
Uh-huh.
it was
And we thought it's totally worth it. And then we found out it wasn't worth it
it
at all.
wasn't worth it.
But the great thing is that taught us a lesson.
Yeah.
And that was we will build a controlled studio and
Mhm.
that we never have to tear down or set up again.
Yep.
And it was
And
good
here we are.
And here we are.
It was a good conversation, but the universe said not good enough.
Yeah. Universe said veto.
The universe is not good enough.
Return to sender.
Try
Um,
again.
So anyways, we're here with Dr. Ruth.
Ooh,
I call you
No.
Dr. Ruth now. You're not there yet, but you're going to be.
You can't say that. And also, you just told me yesterday that Dr. Ruth was this, like
A
a famous
sex
old
psychologist.
granny sex therapist.
Yeah.
She passed away.
Yeah, you could be the new Dr. Ruth.
No.
No. Okay.
She was killed by a vibrator.
Oh.
Justin.
She was the sex doctor. But
How
she's
did the
dead.
vibrator kill her?
I don't know. It's just too much for her heart at this point.
Too much for too much for
You can have too
I
much
love
of a
the
good
motion
thing.
for her heart.
For her heart.
You guys really should watch the podcast on
Uh-huh.
YouTube because Justin is hysterical.
That's where
For
you
her
get to see
heart.
all of the facial expressions.
Yeah.
All the things.
Well, Ruth is one of our dearest friends, closest friends. I've known you for, 12 years now? I made that number up.
I want to say 15.
Ooh!
I think we made it.
I think maybe,
2011
that's
is when we were
13 years.
That's 13.
Split the difference between me and you.
She's not
That
studying
sounds right.
math, but she is studying emotions, and she
Yes.
knows a lot about that.
Yes. And I've known you for a long time. We've had a great relationship, and now you are currently getting your doctorate in psychology,
Clinical psychology.
Mm-hmm. which means we get to have delightful conversations all the time.
all the time. We do.
Which I love. Okay, we're going to talk about a subject that honestly has really impacted me, and I will give all credit due to our conversations because I had never heard of this concept before having conversations with you about this. And I've been in therapy since I was 12 and self-help and been in the whole genre. And yet there's so many things that you can miss. And that's something that's so interesting to me. Whenever anybody tells me I've tried everything, I've done all the things, I immediately get skeptical because I'm like, we often feel like we know all of the things, but we don't.
Yeah.
And there's never a time where I can actually say I've tried everything.
Yeah.
But so in the emotional health realm, this is a concept that was brand new to me probably in the last couple of years, maybe the last year even. And it has really helped my mind and understand something I experience a lot, and then has helped me figure out a pathway. Sometimes when you understand what something is clearly, then you can know what to do with it. And a lot of us, emotions are, for so many of us, emotions are confusing and overwhelming. They feel like they have the power to ruin our lives, ruin our relationships. We often don't know why we do what we do. And so when we can learn what is happening inside of our bodies and our minds and then how to work with that is very empowering.
Mhm.
So do you want to share about intolerable emotions, and then we'll
Sure
talk
can.
about how it's impacted?
Intolerable emotions.
Intolerable emotions. So the concept would be essentially we all have particular emotions and feelings that we really try and avoid at all possible costs.
Yes.
And there's like two differing kind of theories of emotion. So there's a really like essentialist theory of emotion, which is, I would say, like the very first theory of emotion that came out. So if you think about it, it's like the most basic understanding of emotion that we have, which is all emotions exist as a pre-existing concept.
Right.
So when I'm born as a child, I contain inside of me the
All the
capacity,
emotions.
to feel shame, to feel sadness, to feel anger. And it's not that that theory is incorrect. It's just that there's potentially spaces where we've evolved
It's more
that thinking,
complex.
to become a little bit more complex. So there's the sort of second part of that theory is something called constructionist. Psychology's full of all these wanky words that just like
Well, constructionist means like we get to construct things with it, right? Is that why?
Yeah, we're constructing.
Yeah.
I just mean like there's probably simpler ways to say these things. Why do we have to use these
I
wanky
agree.
words? But
Sure. Wanky words.
wanky words.
Wanky words with Dr. Ruth.
That's got a great ring to it. So this idea of constructionist emotion is that we all are constructing the boundaries and the meanings of our own emotions. So what happens is as we're growing up and we're developing, we experience certain affective nervous system states. So we might experience ourselves being in fight or flight. We might experience ourselves shutting down. And we are reading the context in which those affective states are getting activated. And we are putting puzzle pieces together in our head and associating that affective state with a certain experience or meaning. So an example would be, I experience a lot of shame. And when I was growing up, my mum really struggled with depression. And there would be a lot of moments where I would kind of go up to her and ask her a question and she just wouldn't respond. Like you'd kind of get a still face.
Yeah.
And I would then experience that affective state of fight or flight. Like, oh no, this feels threatening. My caregiver is not responding to me. I'm not okay. I'm not going to be safe. And I'm also putting together the logical pieces of the information and going, oh, I must in some way not be good enough for her to respond to.
Right.
There's something about me. There's something about my relationship with my mum. There's something about being ignored that is threatening.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I'm constructing shame for myself.
Yes.
And the idea being that we all can have different experiences of emotions. We might all experience the same emotions,
Sure.
but in different ways.
Yeah.
So for example, shame is an emotion that I experience a lot. It's probably one of my primarily experienced emotions. So I probably have a broader spectrum of experiences where I feel shame
Yes.
than somebody else, let's say. But I probably have a much narrower spectrum of things where I experience anger.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I've just experienced less of that activating state. I've associated it with less contextual information. There's also, it's like fascinating. There's studies out there that show that different cultures actually have emotions that don't exist in other cultures.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yeah. So there's like, I'm going to butcher this, but in Danish culture, there's a word called hygge. Hygge? I can't say it to save my life.
Fair.
But it literally means like an emotion of comfiness and coziness.
Ooh.
Or something to that effect.
I
You'll probably
love
get
that.
some Danish listeners write in and be like, Ruth,
Butchered it.
butchered it. And that's not what it means at all.
Sure.
But to my understanding, it means like a form of coziness and comfiness, but it's not like in the sense that we would just verbally describe something. It's an actual feeling and
A body feeling.
and state that is associated with that context
I love it.
in that culture. And so what can happen is if we are all having our own constructionist experience of emotions, and my experience of emotion is different than yours and different than yours, and it's set by the context that I grew up in and my nervous system and all of that stuff, we all will have different emotions that we find really intolerable. So usually these are kind of one or two emotions that we find and what we mean when we say intolerable is just incredibly difficult to sit with.
Yeah.
Incredibly threatening to sit with.
Like,
'Cause-
I want to get out of this.
Yeah.
I don't want to be present with
Yeah.
it. I want to escape it as
Yeah.
fast as possible.
I got to get out of this as quickly as possible. I got to avoid this as much as I humanly can.
I would say even like if we even have for me, intolerable emotions, how I've seen it for other people and myself is if there's even a hint that that emotion could be present, we already have a coping mechanism
Yes.
that shows up to lock that out.
Yes.
So if I love what you're saying. I'm thinking about it. So as kids, we have body reactions. It lets us know we're in threat. So when your mom didn't look at you, that body reaction let you know something isn't right here. And then your brain goes on the journey of how do I make sense of what is happening? How do I make sense of this threat so that I can avoid ever feeling this pain again? Our brain our brain is designed to help us never feel pain again.
Yes.
The ironic thing, though, is it creates cycles where we keep looping in the pain. So as soon as we attach a meaning to something like, oh, shame is intolerable. If somebody disconnects from me, I can't handle that.
Yeah.
As soon as your brain makes that meaning, now your brain is going to automatically create all kinds of things for you to do if you even feel a hint that somebody could be distancing.
Yeah.
So even for you, I can literally say, like, if you feel someone distancing, you might get really helpful, or you might just kind of get small and fade in the background and have no needs or fade away. I remember confronting you in a conversation because you felt concerned about being a burden. And so you just slowly backed away.
I think I literally physically backed.
Yes. I was like, where did Ruth go? Yes.
Slowly, silently exited the picture.
So when we have intolerable emotions, we have reactions that our brain has set up for us that we often aren't even choosing until we become aware of it.
Totally.
They're automatic responses. And most of the times, the things we do to avoid our intolerable emotions create chaos and pain for us.
Yeah.
And often the things that we do to avoid emotions tie us to that very emotion. And we end up going through it.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Totally. Another way to kind of maybe expand that understanding a little bit is, it's those intolerable feelings are associated with threat. And often that threat is to do with social exclusion in some way.
Yes.
Those intolerable feelings are often something to do with, I'm going to lose the love, I'm going to lose the safety, I'm going to lose the connection that I actually need in order to be safe. And we have like two different parts of our brain. So we have our, like the oldest part of our brain called our limbic system, which is something that we share with animals, and it's literally on or it's off, right? I'm in threat or I'm not.
Yes.
On, off, on, off. And then we have like the thinking part of our brain that sits on top of it. And this is unique to humans. And this part of our brain is phenomenal at finding patterns. And that's its entire job.
Is to find patterns.
Find patterns. Put things together.
Yes.
So you've got a bit of a mess.
Yes.
Actually.
So you're like, when I'm in threat, and then your brain's like, find patterns.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. So let's use my example. I feel threatened with my mum not responding to me. My threat brain is like on, threat. You're not safe, Ruth. You're not safe.
Yes.
You're not safe. And my thinking part of my brain, my human part of my brain is going, what's a common factor between this and other moments where I felt this level of activation? Mum's not responding. Oh, I've asked for something and she's not responded. It must be unsafe to ask for something.
Yes.
It must be unsafe to want connection from somebody. And so what ends up happening is we end up feeling the same level of threat from perceived things.
Yes.
Like you having that conversation with me about needs.
Yeah.
There's no actual threat
Totally
happening in that moment. You're not holding a knife to me.
No.
You're not like verbally abusing me.
No.
You're being very kind and very gentle. But there's a connection in my brain between, oh no, when I have needs and I perceive myself as being a burden, I lose connection, and that's really threatening.
Which this causes crazy making circumstances in relationships, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you're not aware of what your intolerable emotions are, and you're not aware of your capacity to create stories, it creates disaster all over
Yep.
the place.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, all of us have different assigned meaning
Mm-hmm.
because all of our patterns
Yep.
we've decided could be different. So
Yep.
me and you could be in the exact same threatening situation.
Yep.
We could have the exact same threat happen and we could assign different meaning.
Mhm.
I could assign that I wasn't assertive enough
Yep.
and that's why it was unsafe. You could assign that you were too assertive and that's why you were
Yep.
unsafe. And now we would walk around
Mm-hmm.
having those reactions
Mm-hmm.
based on the idea of the threat.
Which, as a side note, this is why it's so vital that we have curiosity.
Mhm.
Like verbalize curiosity inside of
Mhm.
relationships, because when we don't have verbalized curiosity inside of relationships,
Mhm.
we create inaccurate conclusions based out of some concept or perception of threat that's not actually true to our circumstances, and that perpetuates
Right.
disconnection.
Yeah, there's so many times people have assumed that I'm doing a behavior the way that they think in their head,
Absolutely.
or they are assuming that I'm threatened or threatening them. That's not a good example. There's just so many times where people assume I mean something
Mhm.
that I didn't actually mean.
Totally.
Or
Mhm.
assume that I'm mad when I'm not actually mad.
And
or
without the
assume that I'm-
curiosity,
yeah. Mhm.
Mhm.
all of a sudden a case is built, and that assumption and that self-protection, a case is built, and division and disconnection is perpetuated.
Yep.
Whereas we can restore connection by being like, hey, this vulnerability, which is a
Mhm.
necessary part of it, can actually come in and create curiosity and say, hey, this is what's going on for me. This is what I'm hearing. What's actually going on inside of you. And we
Yep.
can dispel the myths that are being created as we have those open
Yeah.
dialogues.
And I wish scientifically people would start to look at humanity this way. Like there is no way to mind read other people.
Correct.
There's no way to say, no, I know you're mad. No, I know you did this to hurt me.
Yeah.
No, I know
Mm.
that, like, because we're all assigning meaning based on our own threat system, based on what we decided as kids was true or not true about
Totally.
us.
Yeah.
And so the idea that it'd be even possible for us to fully assume accurately, which is why I've had to really get humble and learn to be like, this is how I've had to get humble and learn how to say, I can tell something's going on.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is.
Mhm.
I can tell there's energy there, because the opposite is also not true. Like we are intuitive when things are happening with somebody.
Yeah.
So I can tell, oh, there is something going on with Justin. I don't know what it is.
Yep.
That feels like the most truthful thing for us to understand with knowing how our threat system and our story
Yeah.
making systems work together.
Which is a side note within that. I think that one of the bumps that we hit in the road was when you created an assumption about what it was that was going on inside of me versus the approach of like, I don't know what's going on. It just
Mm.
feels like something's going on.
Oh, I thought I could mind read.
Right.
I thought I knew exactly what you were feeling. I thought I knew exactly what you meant. I thought I knew exactly why you were reacting the way that you were
Yeah.
reacting. And I am very intuitive. And there were a lot of things I was accurately picking up on, as in you're having big emotions under the surface.
Right.
There's something going on. But what I didn't know is I would assume it would be anger, and
Mhm.
often it was anxiety. I would assume that it would be
A sense of I don't care about you versus I'm actually scared
Overwhelmed.
or overwhelmed
Mhm.
inside of it. But I also, I mean, just to share that, I also had the same thing where I would create the assumptions inside of me that I knew for a fact what was going on inside of you.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so we all do that. And,
Yep.
and this is really great that you're bringing this up.
And
Yeah.
I think just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying there, like there's some sort of assumption, isn't there? And it probably comes from an internal space of safety in ourselves to try and figure out and assume what
Mhm.
somebody else is experiencing and why. Because if I can know what you're feeling, then I can feel more safe
Yes.
Yes.
with what you're feeling. And sometimes we approach attunement from that space,
Mm-hmm.
and we approach attunement with this concept of assumption.
Yes.
Like I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to mind read what it is that you're feeling and thinking, and you're going to feel really loved by that.
Mhm.
But actually, it's the opposite of attunement, because we're not, attunement in its essence is the curiosity of what are you feeling and why?
Yes.
Like if you think about a parent trying to attune to a kid, you're trying to get the kid to verbalize like the emotion and the experience that they're having. And that is the other half of attunement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, it would have changed our marriage so much if we could have understood the concept that we both were picking up on things. There was truth in the fact that we could experience something happening, but we needed curiosity to understand the real experience. Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm listening to, that I just want to share to everyone here, if you start to view the world, every human is trying to create safety. That's what all of us are doing. There's like, it's very black and white. There's threat and there's safety. And we are all creating what we think safety is. So like, if we think having lots of money is safe, we'll spend our whole life working towards having lots of money. If we think being the most powerful person in a room is safe, then we will work towards being the most powerful person in the room. If we think that having lots of friends is safe, we will build, like we focus on whatever it is we have defined is safe.
Yeah.
The problem is that you can do that. You can make all the money in the world. And I have lots of friends who've been very wealthy, and that actually doesn't calm their threat system. Because the conclusions we come to as a kid is often not very reliable.
Totally. And I think to kind of take that a step further, like if we understand this idea of an intolerable feeling as being really threatening that we're experiencing, part of our thinking brain that's joining all these dots together is also thinking, what do I need to do to avoid this?
Yeah.
What patterns of behavior, what styles of relationship, what styles of conflict, what styles of attachment do I need to adopt in order to avoid having to experience that feeling, which I then find really, really threatening. And I think those are the things that you're then talking about we carry through with us into adulthood.
Yes.
And actually end up re-experiencing the emotion that we find really threatening over and over again, rather than learning, actually, maybe it could be safe for me to feel this feeling.
Yes.
Well, I want to ask you a question. You might have some input right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, if I'm sitting listening to this, I think a lot of us aren't aware of our emotions in the first place. We're especially not aware of maybe what an intolerable emotion would be. How could we identify an intolerable emotion inside of us? Like, what would be signs to be like, oh, that might be an intolerable emotion for me?
Yeah. It's often an emotion that we find ourselves. So, for example, we would see this a lot in the therapy room or a consulting room, right? It's quite often an emotion that we begin to touch on and somebody has to pull out of as quickly as possible. Yes. So we might be having a conversation about shame, or we might be having a conversation about rejection, and you can see the person begin to ever so slightly feel that emotion, and then maybe they have to crack a joke, or they have to change the subject, or they just shut down entirely because we begin to touch on that feeling, and something internally within that person goes, not safe.
Nope.
Pull out. And so for me, learning to recognize some of my intolerable emotions, it's learning to become aware of those spaces of, what am I pulling out of as quickly as I possibly can?
What happened right before that moment where I had to get up off the couch and get outside right then?
Yeah.
Or I think of intolerable emotions like a ball that you are so scared that if you even hold the ball, it will kill you.
Ball of lava.
Like that you actually feel like ball of lava. Yeah, like you're afraid. Like
hot potato.
That is actually a great analogy, both the hot potato and the lava. The fear is, if I feel this emotion, I will melt.
Yes.
And so you're like, if the ball is even getting close to me, I'm going to run. I'm going to yank my hands back, or I'm going to run away, or I'm going to be like, no, or I'm going to be like, no.
Yes.
Like I'm going to do something to try to get that ball of emotion away from me, because I'm terrified that it will destroy me.
Yes. Because it's associated with all of that memory that constructed it in the first place. So it's associated with all of those moments of unattunement, all of those moments of threat.
Yeah. So I'll share a little bit about mine, because I think it will give like a practical example. So I have come to realize that rejection is probably my most intolerable emotion.
Yep.
And here's a couple ways. I didn't even know that I felt rejected most of my life because I had so subconsciously created habits around rejection to not acknowledge it, to not feel it. So like if somebody was going to leave, it would be like, okay, I'll go find another friend over here. If something was going to happen, like I just could so quickly maneuver internally, you know, and I think a lot of people, they just decide to not care about a relationship or not care about a person, or they are like me and they find other friends so that you don't feel that feeling of being rejected. Or like Christians do this a lot. They're like, this just wasn't God's will, or like God has a plan, or that person was bringing me down. I'm so glad that they're not in my life anymore because they were holding me back. Like we just create all of these coping mechanisms.
Like serial dating. That was just popped in my head. Like,
yeah.
I got a date. I'm never alone ever.
Yes.
I don't want to have to feel the sense of rejection or the aloneness or the abandonment or whatever.
And so I just need to always have something.
Yeah.
So rejection for me was like that. The idea of acknowledging that I felt rejected by somebody, I genuinely felt like I wanted to throw up at. The idea, it was holding that ball of lava. And I believed if I held the ball of lava, that it meant I was bad. Like if I said that I felt I was rejected, then it actually meant I was unlovable.
Yep.
Like that was the deep fear connected to it. Now, so much of this is not consciously thought out.
Yep.
It's subconsciously believed.
Yep.
But I believed that if I said I felt rejected by that, it would mean I was rejected, and it would be proof that I'm unworthy of love and unworthy of belonging. It'd be proof that I'm bad. And I was so terrified as a kid that I was bad and that I was unlovable and I was the one broken person, that if you give me any evidence to prove that that is true, it feels catastrophic to me.
Yeah.
It feels so overwhelming. I cannot handle there being one more ounce of evidence that I could be bad.
Yeah.
And so part of me recognizing that rejection was my intolerable emotion is the concept of deciding I'm going to learn how to hold the lava ball, which was very, very scary. I literally remember the first time I admitted to somebody I felt rejected, I had to hold one of my friend's hands for the emotional resilience to just say, I feel rejected. Like it felt so overwhelming, but saying it meant me holding it a little bit. And then I started to depersonalize it a little bit, which was like, actually, everybody feels rejected. That's a human emotion. That doesn't actually mean I'm bad. That enabled me to hold it a little bit longer. And then in counseling, I've begun practicing what they call emotional distress tolerance, which is learning that I can sit with the emotion of rejection a little bit longer, and I don't have to have it destroy me. So rejection for me is what causes disorganized attachment. When I go into disorganized attachment, it's hell for me and it's hell for everyone around me. And so if I go into disorganized attachment, it's like I felt rejected. That's my intolerable emotion. So I do everything I can to avoid that. So like, let's say with Justin, if I feel rejected from Justin, and I never even acknowledged that to him for years in our marriage because that was such a weak emotion. That was too vulnerable to say. And if you tell someone you feel rejected and they keep doing that behavior, that feels like it will break my soul. And so instead, I would get angry or push back or throw up walls or go into avoidance. I would, but then there's also like disorganized for me is where like part of me is pushing you away to protect myself. And then part of me is in my little kid being like, please come rescue me. I need you to come close. Like what I actually need when I'm feeling rejected or disorganized is for someone to lean in towards the relationship. So disorganized for me is that concept of I'm pushing you away, but desperately also needing you to come close because my little kid can't handle the disconnection that I'm feeling right now. And so I remember like there's multiple ways of healing disorganized attachment. And one is Justin learning about it, him learning how to lean in when it's happening. And that's really wonderful to learn with a partner. The other one is what I've had to do a lot of is in my own counseling sessions. Like I remember one of the most significant sessions I had around disorganized attachment was my counselor was like, describe the physical feeling that you feel. Like what is a visual and where is it in your body? And I saw like a crack that went like all the way up my body. And she was like, okay, I want you to just put your hands on the crack, like wherever the crack was. And let's just sit here for a couple minutes with that emotion. And let's just send like some love or attention or connection to that feeling. And what she was doing is helping me just feel the feeling for a couple of seconds. And it was like a light bulb went off inside of my brain because I was like, oh, I can actually feel this. And it was unhooking the feeling from threat.
Yep.
Actually, the feeling I have that my whole world's about to end and that everything's going down, that's actually not true. I can feel rejection and I can feel disorganized attachment happening inside of me. And it is a feeling. It doesn't mean that I am about to break.
Yeah.
And that ability. So now what we've done is we've practiced more and more my capacity to just hold, like if we're talking about holding that ball of lava, maybe I held it for like half a second the first time. And maybe now I'm up to holding it for like 3 seconds. But what that does is that those 3 seconds give me the chance sometimes to choose reactions instead of reacting fast. Because again, for an intolerable emotion, we have 30 different ways that we cope so that we will never have to feel that feeling.
Yeah.
The idea is that feeling has the capacity to destroy our being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a really beautiful example that you give. Like, so there's so many things about an intolerable emotion that get very connected to core beliefs that we have about ourselves. And that's probably actually the most intolerable piece of it is
the belief that's associated.
That is associated. Like, I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. I'm not worth the connection that I'm actually needing. And that core belief being associated with that feeling of rejection. And like we said, we have this amazing brain up here that like connects patterns and problem solves. And so it's going, yeah, I've got 50 different ways that I can avoid this feeling for you.
Yes.
We can be disorganized in attachment.
Yep.
We can avoid.
Yep.
We
can get angry.
Yeah. We can
get busy.
Yeah. We can create logic loops in our head that say, actually, I'm better off without that friend and never needed them in the first place.
Yes.
All of this to try and avoid touching that feeling that is associated with that really deeply painful core belief. And like you're saying, I'm constantly looking for, in my threat detector, things that prove or disprove that really painful core belief. And what you're also saying there is, which fits in with this idea that we construct our emotions and we construct the boundaries of where emotions sit for us. That then means that we have the capacity to change where those boundaries sit. And we have the capacity to change the association with that emotion. And that's what you're describing in that moment is I'm actually sitting with a therapist who's helping me tolerate a really intolerable affective state, which is what I would have hoped my parent would have helped me do.
Totally.
Oh, you're feeling shame. You're feeling rejection.
I can be with you.
Be with you in this. And it's helping your brain reprogram. Actually, maybe I can be in rejection.
Yes.
Even if it's just for 3 minutes.
Yes.
Which then, like you say, gives me a 3 second, whatever window to be able to then make a proactive choice when I feel rejection with Justin, as opposed to a reactive one that just keeps me cycling through that experience of rejection.
Well, and this is why it's so powerful when parents are with their kids in emotions. What it teaches them is that you don't have to have the disconnect in the midst of this big emotion. And that enables kids to know that that emotion doesn't have to be intolerable.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of whether your parents knew how to do that or not. As adults, we now get the opportunity to learn how to reparent ourselves, to learn how to be with ourselves, to learn how to feel those feelings a little bit longer. And like you said, uncouple the belief from the sensation.
Yep.
So the sensation of Justin is rejecting me. Now I can be like, I don't have to take that to mean I'm bad.
Yep.
I don't have to take that to mean I'm rejectable.
Yep.
That does not have to, that brain pathway doesn't have to go there. I can
Totally.
create a new pathway where it can say, Justin is having a reaction, and it may mean that I'm imperfect, but everyone's imperfect.
Yep.
One of the things that was very vital in my process to being able to do this was being able to acknowledge a lie, like my belief system that's in front of me. The lie that I believe about this circumstance or about myself is ... The truth is ... Like I had to begin to work that muscle of ripping off the denial band-aid. Because one of the things that you talked about there was I had denial about something that was very true, a belief system that was inside of me that I didn't want to look at. And that's one of the first steps.
And it's crazy because it just drove my whole life.
Yeah.
And this is what emotions and beliefs do. They drive your entire life. That's why learning how to connect to ourselves is so powerful. It gives me the ability to start to drive my car instead of this subconscious emotion driving my car into all kinds of oncoming traffic, turning the opposite direction that I want to go. I'm like, I want to get to this destination, and they're driving me the opposite direction. Like, I want healthy relationships, and then my fear of rejection is driving me in an opposite direction.
Totally.
And it's creating chaos in my life. And then you just feel like you're doing the same patterns over and over and over again. And that's why connecting to yourself is so freaking powerful, because then you can start to make the choices of where you want your car to go.
So as I was saying,
sorry,
that's fine. You got
it was dynamic. It was
very
illustrative.
dynamic. Yeah. But again, it was the first step is denial. Removing the denial band-aid about something, being like, what is it that I'm denying about the reality of something going on inside of myself that I'm wanting to avoid? Because we're avoiding some emotion. So we have to begin to be like, it's time for me to stop avoiding. What am I denying about what's going on inside of me? And once I can stop the denial, a lot of people stay in denial because they don't believe that they can change. So I'll deny the fact that I have rejection as an intolerable emotion because there's nothing I can do about that. I can't fix that.
Right.
But that's a lie that we believe, right? So once we realize, there's actually solutions to every intolerable emotion I have and my belief system, I can actually do something about this. Then you can feel powerful and be like, it's okay. I don't have to deny any longer. I have the power to do something about this. And that's the hope inside of it.
Yeah.
Is that if you choose to actually look at it, you can do something about it.
And just to connect to what you're saying, like, so again, if we go back to the idea that so much of this gets set in childhood and kids, I'm staying with some of my best friends right now, and they have 3 little kids, and I see this playing out every single day. Kids do not have the ability to think, what is going on for Justin right now?
Nope.
Justin hasn't responded to my request for toast instantly.
Yep.
And now I'm feeling unloved. I'm having a meltdown and believing that I'm never going to get my needs met.
Yeah.
Kids in that stage of development are entirely narcissistic in a way that they should be.
Yes.
Right.
Because they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out their space in the world. So we have zero ability, if I use my example, to think through, my mom's depressed.
Totally.
So her not responding to me is 100% of the time about me.
Yes.
Right.
And if we associate that then with that feeling of powerlessness that you're talking about, that kid feels so incredibly powerless.
Yeah.
Like, because the only way I can
can't make your mom respond to you.
And the only way that I have to make sense of this really painful situation is to turn it on me.
Yeah.
That's my
It's
only
true.
option.
Yep.
And that's an incredibly powerless and out of control feeling option, actually.
Yeah. And it's very painful.
Very painful. Yeah.
And I would say a lot of people grow up with that deep belief that they are bad.
Yes.
Whatever needs their parents couldn't meet for them, whatever pain they had from their childhood, they walked away with subconscious beliefs. It must be because I'm not worthy.
Yeah, that was what was coded inside of me, right?
Yeah.
I grew up being like, oh, I must be fundamentally broken. Like at the core of me, I'm like a broken little toy that'll never be fixed. And it's all about how broken I am. And then as an adult, I had to start going on a journey and say, hey, maybe that wasn't all about me. Maybe those reactions, those responses that I experienced, maybe there was a lot more going on. And that's also a side note. One of the powerful ways to help heal this process, the curiosity element that we talked about earlier, curiosity actually helps us understand more of the story, what was going on inside of my story and inside of the other people's story as a child. And then that gives context and helps us to start rewriting our belief system as well.
Yeah. What is an intolerable emotion for you?
I think abandonment is probably an intolerable emotion for me. So I think it's played out in our relationship. It's played out in a lot of other relationships, where there's ways that I would go fall on my sword and apologize, and try and reconcile as fast as possible because the feeling of abandonment felt so terrible inside of me. So I could be observed as I'm an avoidant, but my avoidance was just me internally trying to just get away from this feeling of I'm feeling abandoned right now. And then, okay, what's the next step? If I can't get away from it from avoidance, then I'm going to turn and try and apologize or try and reconcile, even if it means like running over any sense of what I felt. And it's like, it doesn't even matter what I felt. I just need to get this back together so I don't feel abandoned again. And
your dead zone, I think, is a good example of the intolerable emotion.
Of how I then took, once I felt abandoned enough or hurt enough, I had what I called the dead zone. And that's a place inside of my soul. Historically, it doesn't exist there any longer. I've really dealt with it. But it's that place inside of my soul where all of a sudden I buried someone. An entire relationship went into the dead zone. So if Ruth pushed enough painful experiences where I felt abandoned and unthought of enough, I would suddenly be like, you're dead to me. Dead zone. That never happened. She was never part of my life. Doesn't matter. I'm going to forget all of it so I don't have to feel any of the sting of it.
And oftentimes when we have big reactions like that is letting us know how much pain or how much fear or how overwhelmed we are by the idea of that emotion. And that has really given me a lot of compassion. So learning about intolerable emotions has given me compassion for why I have the reactions I do. I'm like, oh my gosh, every part of me thinks this is going to break me. And so I'm fighting like hell to try to hold on to a semblance of self. I'm fighting so hard to not be broken into a million pieces. And so that compassion, even for like, there was a dead zone inside of you. Well, that was because it felt so terrifying to touch the pain of what they did to you, that your being created a safety valve that was like, throw them in the dungeon of the dead zone so you don't have to feel abandoned.
Because if they never existed, I don't have to feel abandonment. Abandonment doesn't exist to someone who didn't exist inside of my life, right? It's not there. I'm fine. I don't have any pain on this.
And then
why they don't exist.
You can protect yourself. And again, that creates such compassion in me for people, why they do. As soon as I started to recognize it in me, I could feel those feelings of I do everything I can to avoid this. So when I see it in somebody else, I'm like, oh, it's almost like we're terrified of our own emotion. Our intolerable emotions are things that we're terrified of that can happen inside of us at any given moment, which is so scary. It's like we're terrified that a bomb threat's going to go off at any given moment. And we don't know what to do with that. So then when I frame something like his dead zone, before I'd be like, he can be so cold and just dissociate from people. And that seems scary to me. Now when I hear it, I'm like, wow, you must have had so much fear and so much panic. You must have been so terrified of the pain that you had to do something in order to protect yourself. What are you feeling?
I'm feeling nothing. Why are you staring at me?
Are you having some emotion?
I don't feel anything. I don't know. While you're validating, like, I was like, because I did a lot of deliberate work to deal with the dead zone.
Mm.
I think as you're sitting there talking, I don't think I've really sat down and got
To the compassion part.
intimate with why I created it.
Mm.
Like, I don't think I've intimately sat down and been like, I want to know all the reasons why, Justin, you might make a dead zone.
Mm.
And so I think that, like, I can sit here and I can feel like, oh yeah, I did feel it incredibly painful and scary.
Mm-hmm.
I felt in so many of those circumstances, like, because I started seeing a timeline and a flood of experiences all of a sudden as you're talking. And I was like, oh yeah, I felt so abandoned and unsafe.
Yeah.
I was at such a breaking, like it was snapping a part of my soul, these individual relationships. And then I just went,
Yeah. You're like, I'm breaking. I will find a way to not break anymore.
right. And that was for all of us, that's survival actions, right? That's
Absolutely.
survival brain,
Yeah.
survival response. But yeah, as you were validating it, I could feel myself going into a validation of that. Like that, there was a strong reason for why you did that. That's how you got by, Justin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the compassion, because you've maybe never
Well, that is
looked at
yeah,
the
that is compassion
piece
inside of it. Yeah.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think you've probably had compassion before on why you had the dead zone.
Yeah. And I don't think I had harsh judgment.
No.
I just haven't sat with compassion on.
Yeah.
This is why that existed.
How scary it was.
Yeah.
I have a lot of compassion and tenderness towards you. And I think it's such a relatable human emotion to feel terrified of rejection and abandonment. And when we're getting hurt over and over and over again, everybody needs a way to make the hurt stop.
Yeah. And I think like something that's popping into my head as you're talking, I'm like, my history was a history where I could not get to comfort. Nurture and comfort were not readily available.
Yeah.
And so as you're reflecting on this, I'm like, I was so desperate to get to comfort and nurture somewhere. I could feel how my soul was like looking all around, trying to apprehend that. And it's like, okay, there is nothing. There's no alternative to this. This must be the only solution.
Yeah.
So in that, there's the compassion for how deeply I wanted the nurture and comfort that I couldn't access.
And a real compassion as well for that space of, if you put yourself in that little kid's situation, I really want nurture. I really want comfort. I don't know how to get to it. So I guess I'll just choose numbness instead.
Yeah.
I guess this is the next best thing. And I'll just have to live with it.
Yeah. Which I was just thinking, like, how many people relate to numbness? Like, numbness is such a common thing that people will go into, is I'm just numb to that. And what that says, like when you connect to the compassionate aspect.
And numbness, exactly what you're saying, is a way that we avoid intolerable emotions. There's some emotion that we don't want to feel. And so our body takes over for us and goes into numb. Something feels too overwhelming. Something feels too scary. Something feels like too much. So numbness just takes over, so we don't have to face it because we feel like we don't have the resiliency. And this is why learning emotional distress tolerance, learning how to feel our negative feelings, is so empowering to us.
Yeah.
because the more we can feel them, the less we need to use these protectors that keep us trapped.
Yeah.
The more we can actually choose what to do.
Yeah. And the more empowering it feels, because, you know, we're essentially what we're doing is reframing that emotion with our adult logic, Mm-hmm.
our adult selves, that's able to integrate new pieces of information, that's able to say, actually, I do have supportive relationships. And even if nobody was there for me in that moment, I would know how to comfort myself, and I would know how to get to some level of safety. And we're breaking out of the rigidity of those childhood assumptions around that emotion.
It's good.
What is something that you've learned as you've been recognizing intolerable emotions inside of yourself? What's something that you've learned about yourself?
I think just like something that you were describing earlier, which is like the complexity of the different ways that I will try and avoid it.
Yes.
It's like a myriad of options. So I would say, I probably already talked about it, but I think one of my most intolerable feelings is shame. And it's connected to those really deep core beliefs of I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, there's something broken, there's something wrong, there's something uniquely wrong about me compared to everyone else. And it's connected to spaces where I have avoidant attachment. It's connected to spaces where I avoid conflict. It's connected to spaces where I people please. It's connected to spaces where I numb out. It's connected to spaces where I've used substances to numb out. It's connected to spaces where I've used sex to numb out. It's connected to spaces where I've used, I mean, the list just goes on and on. Actually, like, I'm kind of blown away by how creative
you've been
our minds to avoid it. Yeah.
Yes.
And even some of those logic patterns of like, well, actually, maybe sometimes I'll sit in accusation of somebody else so that I don't have to feel shame. Like, I'll blame you. You're the problem.
Or I'll figure you out.
Yeah.
And I'll do everything that I think will make you happy.
Yeah.
There's so many ways that we try to avoid that.
I want to add something to this. So oftentimes we view human behavior as a morality issue versus a pain issue.
Yeah.
So when we have conversations like this, these kinds of conversations are vital to getting deeper into compassion and understanding this isn't about whether or not most people are being immoral. This is about how people are trying to cope with their inability to process pain well.
Yeah. And you've just reminded me of something I was thinking when you two were having an exchange. Like, there's a saying somewhere that talks about how when we look at something that we do out of pain, we look at the context of our entire lives.
Yep.
And we go, oh, this is because of ... But when we look at something that someone else does out of pain, it becomes an identity statement.
Yes.
So Justin has a dead zone. Justin must be an uncaring person.
Totally.
Justin must have like a really judgmental side of him.
Totally.
And we're not looking at actually the whole backstory of Justin was so desperate for nurture and so desperate for care that the next best thing that he could come across was to numb himself to that experience.
Yeah.
And it's that curiosity that you're talking about, I think, that leads us into that compassionate discovery with each other.
Yeah.
This is a good conversation.
A good conversation. I love it. And I love you. And
one thing that
has helped me is actually now that I'm aware, and I think rejection and abandonment would probably be a high majority of people's intolerable feelings, because I would bet under shame is rejection and abandonment, fear of that. Although anger, I think, is an intolerable one for some people, and I don't know that that's connected to that. But I think that's a very common human thing. And the more I've learned, the more even that I can narrate about it to you, to Pizzi, to Justin, when I can actually even just start to communicate. A lot of what we're trying to do in order to create a healthy relationship with our emotions is to learn to feel them, talk about them, and recognize that what we think they mean may not be true. And so a lot of what I was thinking is the more I can process with you, like, oh, I felt rejected. And I'm recognizing that doesn't mean that I'm bad. That means I'm human, because everybody's feeling rejected. Like, when you can start to bring things into the light, a lot of love and truth can get soaked into it.
Yep.
And so it's really beautiful when you can start to share with your people what's going on. And it gives them insight in how to love you. And it gives them insight on why you do the weird freaking things you do. Because we all do weird things to protect ourselves.
And there's literally something about attunement with another person that decreases threat. Like, if we think about so much of the threat is that social threat, that isolationism that we might experience. So if you can narrate to me, Ruth, I feel rejected, and I can hear it, and I can love you and hold space for that, there's relational attunement that's actually decreasing the threat response in your brain, and your mind is remapping. Actually, maybe someone can be with me in this emotion.
Yeah. which is incredible,
Mhm.
and why it's beautiful that we can bring healing
Mhm.
to each other.
Ruth, I love that you came out here to visit here in the States.
I came all the way just to do this podcast, actually.
Just this one.
Just this one.
Just this.
I'm getting a really fat check. Nervous laughter.
All right. Well,
You get nothing.
subscribe.
I get your love.
You get our love.
That's priceless.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Yeah.
Come
If
watch
you haven't
us.
subscribed on
See her
YouTube,
beautiful face. See that we're all actually twinning in a very weird way
Mhm.
Yeah.
this time, or tripleting, I
Yeah.
guess.
Hit the bell. Because the bell tells you, hey, guess what?
There's
Another
a new one.
New video.
Yeah.
What's happening?
All
Over
right.
here. All right.
right.
I'm leaving. Bye.
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 Bye.